I'm Rick, and this is Burn After Reading. I think whether I like it or not, I'm going to lose some of you subscribers, viewers, and sometimes, depending on what my episode is, it's a couple hundred, it's a couple thousand. I don't understand the YouTube algorithm. Maybe it's about the subject, but I don't know. But, anyways, that's okay because supporting the truth, even when it's unpopular, shows the capacity for honesty and integrity. Before I get into the main topic of this episode, let me address something. I just saw something and heard something that made me sick to my stomach. Rick Snay of Delphi After Dark, he has a live stream that's going on as we speak as of this recording. And he addressed a situation where he showed Julie Melvin the Delphi crime scene photos, and I believe it was at some pub. And according to him, she was persistent, crying, begging. She just wanted to look at these photos, for professional reasons. And I was thinking to myself, I'm sorry, what? A professional what exactly? A professional jackass? I don't understand the qualifications that she thinks she has, or that anyone thinks she has, as a professional to view those photos. I've been very hesitant about speaking about Snay, even when it came to watching him play grab ass with Greeno on a live stream, even though he threatened to murder his, family. Oops. He was mad, so that's what people, when they're upset, they just say, hey, I'm mad, I want to kill your fucking family. But, anyways, in my very passionate opinion, Rick Snay's moral compass is broken. While I'm glad he didn't share the photos electronically with anyone, I still think it's sick he would still share them with anyone, even if it's letting them look at his phone or whatever device to gawk at those photos, professional or otherwise. I'm sorry. His ass is not explaining his way out of this. He, along with anyone not associated with law enforcement, the prosecution, and the defense, and the eventual jurors, those people, they get a right to see those photos for professional reasons. Anyone outside of that until then doesn't. I don't care if Julie conned him or not. He should not have shared those photos with anyone. Period. When he got those photos, he should have immediately spoken with law enforcement, let them know exactly what he has. He should have kept his mouth shut about it. He did not need to make live streams about it. Oh, hey, yeah, someone else knew that I had them, so I figured I might as well go ahead and talk about it. No, you didn't have to do any of that shit. None of that stuff needed to happen. Especially if you care about the integrity of this case. And that goes for anyone else. So don't think I'm just picking on Rick Snay. Anyways, if I am asked, no, I don't want to debate Rick Snay or anyone on their live stream, over the phone, on Messenger, on email, or whatever. There is nothing to debate as far as I'm concerned. It's just these situations is what brings the toxic level to the Delphi case, as if the murders weren't enough. Anyway, I needed to speak my piece on this matter because it upset me, and it should upset all of you. Anyone that has a moral compass should have found that really disgusting. Anyways, I said what needed to be said. So let's get on to what this episode is about. Where do we stand? Where do we think we stand? Are we lying to ourselves, or are we being lied to? Who should we listen to? At the end of the day, we have to search our heart and conscience. We are responsible for feeding our heads, and just like What we put inside our bodies will determine the kind of body we will have. Same thing goes with the mind. I mean, there's a lot of blowhards out there spewing their narratives, but what do they really offer us other than entertainment? I don't care how long they've covered the Delphi case. I don't care how many court appearances they've made. I don't care if their name appeared in court transcripts or in the judge's email. I don't care if they made it on a TV show or on a news segment. Perhaps that feeds their validation, or perhaps it feeds yours. But I need more. I need substance of knowledge. So again, I ask, what do they have to offer us other than entertainment? Just a couple days ago, the Murder Sheet podcast had an insightful interview with Brett and Alice of the Prosecutors podcast. And I'd like to share some of what was discussed because I believe what was shared is beneficial and maybe, just maybe, it will reveal a truth to you. Perhaps an uncomfortable truth, but still a truth. And I'm already hearing the grumblings because I mentioned the murder sheet. And yes, I am aware of the controversy that is going on based on Delphi After Dark's YouTube live stream. I get it. But I'm not focused on the murder sheet as much as I am focused on Brett and Alice of the Prosecutors podcast. Their expertise and what they talk about is what you need to hear, despite what you may feel about the murder sheet. And honestly, I don't know. I need to look into that a little bit more before I can form a educated opinion on them. But I know that the interview that I listened to, it's solid, good stuff. Whether it's on the murder sheet, whether it's on someone else's podcast, whatever. You still need to listen to it for them. You see, I like listening to experts, people who actually know what they're talking about. It's why I find it so interesting that what a lot of the experts are saying is not exactly lining up with certain YouTubers' opinions. Some of these YouTube creators are spouting off ill-informed opinions. They don't really understand what's going on. And because of that, they have listeners or viewers who enjoy their content and consume it without understanding its poison. And I'm not even sure if some of these content creators are self-aware of the poison that they are injecting into their audience. But it's still poison. Let's get into the November 6th court filing to the Indiana Supreme Court, which was filed on behalf of Richard Allen, the emergency writ of mandamus and prohibition. Brett found it interesting that this was the second mandamus, as the first was conservative and had things in it that, everyone can agree with, such as things being public and on the record. Then the first mandamus is followed by a second one that is asking for something much bigger, such as reinstating Richard Allen's original public defenders, Baldwin and Rosie, and having a developed record for the reason of removing the attorneys, which will most likely appeal to the Indiana Supreme Court, even if the court had a broad reason for doing so. Because of this, Brett believes that Judge Gull had been unfairly treated in different perspectives by, onlookers, but she also failed to protect herself by not having a record so that the reviewing court and the public can understand the reason. So the issue isn't that Gull violated Allen's Sixth Amendment. It's not that her ruling was incorrect, but simply having a record of understanding which there is a possible reason that it didn't happen. And it's also possible it could have harmed Allen's attorneys in the long run, but we'll get into that later. Alice brings up an interesting point on whether a court reporter was present in chambers during the counsel's meeting with the judge or not. And definitely check out the Murder Sheet's entire episode on this. I'm only covering some things, but they cover everything and it's worth your time. But what's interesting is that Richard Allen's mandamus asked for things that the law does not support. One being that it says that the due process of Richard Allen and Rosie and Baldwin had been violated. And see, there's a problem there because Rosie and Baldwin in this matter do not have due process rights. They have inserted themselves, and it's more about them than it is about Richard Allen. And, the other is because Richard Allen wants Rosie and Baldwin to stay on, and that somehow violates his due process, and it doesn't. Also, the filing addresses some Indiana law, but oddly, it addresses a lot of other state laws that do not apply to Indiana state law, making the argument essentially invalid. It's not, the Indiana Supreme Court is not interested in what other state laws dictate, other than its own. They are Indiana. They're not Tennessee. They're not California. They're not Alabama. It may confuse the public, and believe me, it has. But the Indiana Supreme State Court, they don't care, other than what's in their own laws in their own state. And of course, there's going to be detractors that are going to say, oh, that's because Indiana is so corrupt. And that's an easy way out, but that's not it. The laws are the laws. If you want them changed, those got to go through lawmakers. It's that simple. The law is the law. So, if people have a hard time understanding the law in Indiana, and I'm not claiming to be an expert, I defer to the experts. What I would suggest is either learn how to read a court filing or have a legal expert explain it to you. Don't just assume you know. The things that I learned from experts. And that's okay. Everyone should do that. Learn. It's good for you. Brett made a statement on if the mandamus is even appropriate in this situation, especially since the arguments made in it is regarding appeals and not mandamuses. So again, check out the Murder Sheet episode to learn more about this because it was very informative. I can't recommend it enough. It was a great, solid, educational, and informative episode. So the issue of gross negligence was brought up and whether there's a standard for it. And Alice quipped that the standard is, well, the word itself, gross negligence. And Alice made a point that perhaps the reason Judge Gull didn't make a record is because she didn't want to put a bar licensed attorney in a bind because then it would be on the record for all time. It would be reported to the bar and it would lead to some very serious issues, especially, look, Gull perhaps was doing them a favor and, well, it backfired on her. They showed their gratitude. Now, is that a factual reason? I mean, we don't know. I think we'll find out maybe. But, this is from the perspective of Alice, and I think Brett too. But anything that goes on the record, I mean, it's going to spell very bad things for Rosie and Baldwin. Alice gave a clever example. What Rosie and Baldwin are asking is the equivalent of going to a teacher and stating, I know you gave me a failing grade, I failed the class, but I want you to list every single thing I did wrong for all time, and I want you to nail it on the wall and make sure you put it in permanent marker for everyone to see. I want to know why. So basically, be careful what you ask for because you just might get it. And quite honestly, maybe that's exactly what needed to happen. Honestly, Judge Gull should have put it all on the record and embarrassed these clowns because with the crap that they pulled, it's what they deserve. Anyway, Brett thinks that Richard Allen's defense wants a certain thing to happen. They're hoping that the Indiana Supreme Court will say, hey, there's no record here. There should have been a record. We're going to send it back. But due to the bad blood between the judge and the initial defense attorneys, they're going to remove Judge Gull and give the case to a new judge. Then the initial defense is going to hope that the judge just gives them a stern warning, or else they're going to do what Judge Gull did, and that's remove them from the case. But at least they'll be back representing Richard Allen. And of course, hoping that happens versus what actually will happen are two completely different things. And again, Alice gives another insightful example of what the defense is trying to do. And again, I do highly recommend that you do check out the Murder Sheet episode interview with Brett and Alice because it's phenomenal. But Alice went on to explain why she believes there isn't enough to recuse Judge Gull from the case or to prove bias. Just because the judge rules against any motions that the defense made, even if it's every motion, the judge is doing what they're supposed to do, and that's their job, and that is to judge. They are making a judgment call. So, Brett laid out what Richard Allen's defense probably is hoping will be the best likely outcome for them, and that will be the court grants the mandamus, but sends it back with the instructions to hold an evidentiary hearing in which Judge Gull basically skewers Rosie and Baldwin for everything that they did. But the most likely outcome will be a straight denial from the Indiana Supreme Court because, let's be real, Judge Gull did not remove Rosie and Baldwin due to the vigorous advocacy. Anyone who thinks that is either ignorant, a liar, or both. It was due to gross negligence. But there is evidence on record of that gross negligence, and it is undisputed that Baldwin left photographs of two dead children, Abby and Libby, where one is naked, out for anyone to see on his conference room table as he went off to go do something else, just for his buddy or associate to mosey on in, snap photographs of photographs like some deviant, and distribute it to a buddy of his, and then that person distributes it to someone else, and so on and so on, and here we are now. Even the defense does not dispute they don't dispute this, and to think that it was unreasonable to remove them, and to think that the judge is just being mean. I mean, you're living in fantasy land. So tell me, how did the judge abuse her discretion? How is that abuse? You think it's okay for a lawyer to just leave, sensitive crime scene photos out, especially with a gag order in place, even if it's a friend or a former associate who is just stopping by? Really? You're that delusional. You think that's okay? Because I'm sorry, I would be shocked if the Indiana Supreme Court recused Gull over that. Because she made a judgment call on that. But here's the thing, and I agree with Brett on this. You can disagree with Judge Gull, and you can think she got it wrong. But she's the judge, and she is the one with the burden of making the tough decisions, the tough calls. So sorry if you don't like it, but I think Anya said it best. What some of you are doing is the equivalent of the "let me speak to the manager of true crime." I'm sorry, but your personal preference, it doesn't matter. The law matters. So Kevin asked a very interesting question, and what would prove a judge's bias in a case that would merit removal? Is it based on what someone on YouTube thinks? No. And Alice laid it out. An example would be if a judge had an undisclosed relationship, like sleeping with the prosecutor or the defense. It's that high of a standard to where you are unable to separate your relationship with your objectivity. Simply being friends or going to school with someone isn't enough to be a conflict. I bring this up because so many think that it's a conflict of interest because Judge Gull happens to be friends with one of the new defense attorneys, William Libretto. And I hope I'm not pronouncing his last name wrong, but yeah, I'm sorry. Claim debunked. In fact, this question has been posed to other trial judges, lawyers, and juris doctors, and they say the same thing. As long as their friendship does not violate their ethical duties, there's no conflict of interest. Many of these people can know each other from college, the bar association, or a community event. So despite how you feel about it, it does not in itself violate the law. There's no conflict of interest unless conflict of interest can be proven. Simply saying, judge is Facebook friends with one of the new defense guys and we think that this whole thing is a scandal, conflict of interest. No, it doesn't work that way. Let's be honest here. What's going on is that Rosie and Baldwin are engaged in a public campaign against Judge Gull and the evidence against Richard Allen, and it seems to be winning over public opinion. But that's not where this case needs to be decided. This case needs to be decided inside a courtroom by a jury, and hopefully an untainted jury. Is that even possible at this point? I mean, I hope so. But Brett makes an interesting point on what could remove Judge Fran Gull, and that is the appearance of conflict versus actual conflict because of this horrific public campaign. I've said this before in my West Memphis 3 series, and it's sadly becoming true in this case, and that is perception isn't always reality. The appearance of bias, painted by a slick defense team, does not mean there is actual bias going on. All of this is so you can turn your eyes away from the actual evidence against Richard Allen. The facts of the multiple confessions, placing himself at the crime scene that day, his own self-incrimination of describing himself as Bridge Guy, the witnesses, etc. There's so much more. This smear campaign and other tactics is to avert your eyes from that and so that you can gaze upon the circus. Don't let them do that to you, because I believe that's what's going on here. And I always hear this a lot. People say, well, you must think that Richard Allen is guilty, and well, he's innocent until found guilty. And while that is true in the legal sense of the law, let's stop bullshitting ourselves. Did you really think that Ted Bundy was innocent until he was actually found guilty? Did you really think that? Or did you really think that Casey Anthony was innocent? Did you really think that O.J. Simpson was innocent? Did you really think that Jeffrey Dahmer was innocent until he was found guilty by jurors? Because I don't believe you if that's what you're saying. That or you're stupid. One or the other. So yes, in the legal sense, I get it. I do understand. He is innocent until he is found guilty in the legal sense. But if that's the case, then you don't believe in wrongful convictions, right? Because if they're found guilty, well, then they're guilty, right? There's no such thing as a wrongful conviction. Because that's what I hear about the West Memphis 3. That's what I hear about Adnan Syed. That's what I hear about Stephen Avery. Oh, they've been railroaded by the system. They're not guilty. So, waiting for a jury to decide this, is that really where you want to lay your hat? I mean, that's up to you. Just food for thought. Anyways, I'm going to end it here. I highly recommend the Murder Sheets November 6th interview with Brett and Alice of the Prosecutors podcast. It was just very superb, very well done, very educational, very informative, and I think it's worth your time to listen to it. Until next time. I don't like to say, can't hold it in this time.